Hey everyone, I am here with Shannon Jamail. We just recorded a couple great episodes of the podcast, and you can find more about Shannon at mindbodycomplete.com. She's a podcast host, she's an author, she does retreats. She's all about helping women elevate and get to the next level. Shannon, what's up?
Hey, how are ya?
I'm doing great. I had a lot of fun chatting with you on those episodes. I feel like I don't know. I just feel like the pace was good. We had good energy, and the topics just they weren't topics that I expected us, places I expected us to necessarily go, but it always tends to work out that way.
I know, I loved it. I loved just the ease of it, and it definitely flowed really, really easily, but I didn't expect it to go where it went either, and that's kind of the best conversations, though.
Yeah. What's your favorite, when you do your podcast and you
Mhm.
bring people on, is it conversational? Is it interview style? I listened to your 100th episode, which at the time of this recording went live that day,
Yes, it did.
which was awesome. By the way, congratulations on 100. That's quite the milestone.
Thank you, thank you. Yeah, most of the time, they're just casual conversations. I mean, it is exactly what my podcast says, it's the happy hour, and I try to make it like the 100th episode was just a one-off. It was just me talking about what we're going to do the next season and stuff. But usually it's just like, I'll have a general idea, maybe like how you do, where who the person is and kind of where I wanted to go maybe. But usually it's like, what would you do if we were sitting at a bar with a cocktail, and what would we talk about? Or at a restaurant or tea in a coffee shop, whatever. But just a real casual conversation on what they're doing, what's important to them, what's coming up in their life, and how it's relevant to maybe what I'm thinking and what I'm doing. So yeah, casual conversation is what I prefer.
What do you think's been the biggest evolution from your podcast from episode 1 to episode 100?
Oh gosh, knowing, okay, this might sound really rough, but knowing who is not my ideal guest, if I'm being very honest, because I'm sure you do. I get requests all the time of people who hear I've got a great pitch for your podcast, or I'd love to be on your podcast. I'd love to be featured on your podcast, and I've just learned really quickly that, my audience is very specific. I'm very specific. I'm not for everybody, and who I am from, I'm very honored and humbled. But I just know that, there were times where I tried to force the situation just to maybe have content even. And that just never, it just is, yeah, not ideal.
Now, let me play devil's advocate for a second,
Sure.
because we did that a little bit on the pod when we recorded the podcast, and I loved when you
Yeah.
did that because I love being challenged, and I think that's one of the things. Before I go here, I just want
Yeah.
to mention I think that people in today's world, I think that tolerance and acceptance are such a big part of our culture these days
Mm,
that people are afraid to have are afraid to have arguments, and when they do have arguments, argument now has such a negative connotation,
yep.
where I think it's okay to have an argument
I do
if
too.
you do it in a good spirit, and there's no reason why you can't have an argument with someone and walk away, both of you walk away better than when you started.
Yeah, I think that all has to do with intention. Are you coming into intending to prove something, or are you coming intended to share? And that's to me the biggest difference is what's your intention when you're going into a conversation.
I agree. And I think you can have disagreements and
Sure.
arguments that don't end in yelling and screaming and people
I
disliking each
agree.
other. And so that's just something that came up there that I wanted to mention. But we were talking about guests, right? And you're talking
Yeah.
about having people on. And I think that the interesting thing for my podcast has been um, I'm willing to have a conversation with anyone. I'll give anyone, and I have those intro calls before we start, before I invite them to be on the show. But I think that it is as I do more, as I've gone down this path and done more and more interviews, I feel like it's up to me as an interviewer to sharpen my skill set enough to where I can take someone and help them pull their story out in a way that provides value to the audience. Now, granted, if their topic or their subject matter is completely in the opposite direction or their values don't align with mine, that's a whole other topic. That's a whole other discussion.
Sure.
But I feel like there are so many people in the podcast space. I'm not saying you're doing this, but I would love to hear your
Sure.
take on this. I think there's people in the podcast
Sure.
space that feel like, okay, now I've had so many shows, or now my show's about this, but I only want to have the big names on
Mm,
because I want to be a big name, so I'm only going to have them on. But what about the other people that are successful? What about, like, anyone can have Tony Robbins, Oprah, Gary Vee, Jack Canfield, those people that are seasoned professionals that everyone knows. Anyone can have them on and have a good podcast episode because they can pick up your slack. But
sure.
can you pick up the slack of someone who is brand new but has the desire to be really good, but maybe their skill set's just not there yet?
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, so I probably don't have the skill set to have a Tony Robbins on because I probably would be like, duh. So I'm just gonna throw that out right now. But yeah, I don't at all look for how big their audience is, or that's not how I vet my guests whatsoever. I don't even look really. Probably shouldn't say this, but I don't even look at their social media other than if I'm looking to see what their vibe is, not like what their following is. But really, I just have that pre-call and like just see, who they are and what they're wanting to share. For me, it's what are you wanting to share with my audience? If you're purely trying to sell something, that's probably not going to be what is going to be a fit for me and my audience. But I agree with you. I'm not looking for, how big your audience is or how big your name is or how much, numbers you have in your back pocket. That's just not at all what influences me. It really is what message are you wanting to share and how can my audience benefit from your message. Those are my only really drivers in the, choosing of a guest.
For me, yeah, I love that. For me, I look for vibe.
Yeah.
That's
Oh
really it. I
yeah,
mean,
the energy.
yep, I'll get on the phone with pretty much anyone, and usually when someone asks to be on or someone submits for some vouches for someone to be on, typically they have the
Yeah,
background and they have like the what's the word, the resume, so to speak. They have
sure.
the they check the boxes, but we have to be able to have a conversation. And I'll even have people on the show that I don't agree with their message completely. Now it has to be, within a certain
Sure.
framework, right? Because, again, I'm a Christian, so I'm probably not going to have someone on who is very much the other direction, who's like satanic, so
Sure.
to speak.
Sure,
But
sure, sure.
so that's kind of where I draw the line. But I mean, I will have people on that have very different points of view, very different things. And I believe in a good conversation and differing of opinion and a good argument. I think there's nothing wrong with that as long as it's within the framework of we're not doing this to be right. We're doing this to share ideas,
Yes.
and we're not going to walk away angry. We're going to walk away with mutual respect, because I
Yes.
think that there's something instead, like, I don't believe arguing will necessarily change someone else's point of view, because you have to make the decision to change your point of view. I can't change your point of view. However, I do believe in asking thoughtful questions, understanding where the other person's coming from because they're still a person, and trying to understand why they feel the way they feel and respecting that. And
Yeah.
if you open up to someone like that and you give, because most people, they're just combative, right? And
Hmm.
they default there. But if you
Yeah.
give someone the space to be themselves and not apologize for it, and you listen to them, that doesn't mean I have to agree with you. I can explain my point of view as well. But a lot of times that will make them rethink their position more than if I come at you and say, no, you're wrong. This is the way it is.
Yeah, so I'm a big, big believer that you can't really convince someone of anything. That's just that person's already coming with their own confirmation biases. They're seeking, anything that aligns with them, and they're literally blinders. Like picture it with a horse with the blinders on. Like they're just in that space. A lot of us are. And so, you're exactly right. If you can approach the conversation with the intention to understand the person, that's not the same as agree. I just want to understand the person. I just want to understand what makes them tick. You'd be surprised. And if you really do approach it that way, then they in turn will, their defensive guards kind of come down. They're like, wait a minute, well, maybe I want to know what this person is thinking too. Maybe I want to know where they're coming from too. And that's when you can come together and have these really amazing conversations, discussions, arguments, whatever you want to call them. And each person might still walk away from it believing what they originally believed, but they might have an appreciation for the other person's perspective and belief as well. So yeah, I totally agree. That's why to me, social media will drive me up a damn wall, because people are on there just screaming out their beliefs, feeling like if you're not part of this belief and if you don't believe this, I'm unfollowing and unchecking and whatever, and you just all whatever. Well, I mean, that's just kind of small-minded. I hate to say it. It's just a very small-minded perspective. I'm not even saying what you believe is wrong. I'm just saying it's small-minded if you believe that everybody should believe what you believe.
Yeah, I agree 110%. And I think that, I think that it's kind of a shock to people if you give them that space
Yeah.
and you don't try to convince them. I think that they'll be more apt to listen and actually understand and be curious if you're not trying to convince. If you
Yes.
respect what they think, what they believe, but you come in. And I think that's part of the interview process. And I think that's why, this came up and I want to talk about this, is because, when you have people on a podcast as a host, or you're just having a conversation with someone or whatever. I think what most podcast people tend to do, podcast hosts, is have people on that believe what they believe and talk
Mm,
about the same things.
mhm.
And that's fine if that's what you do and that's works for you and that's safe. But I think it's a whole lot more interesting to go different places, to have people on that have different opinions, that believe different things, but still give them the space and the respect to talk about that, to articulate
Yeah.
it. And that doesn't mean you have to sit there and go, yeah, you're right, which is what a lot of people do because they typically have people on that believe the same thing. But go in and say, that's interesting. Here's what I think.
Mhm.
And then have a real dialogue that way. I think that's super interesting.
Yeah, I love actually, having people on the show that I either don't know anything about what they believe, which is like really fun to me. We've had lots of people on that, I've just like, I have no idea what they're talking about. So it makes me really curious. And then I've had people on that are like, definitely are not on the same wavelength as me. But that, I can really just dig in deeper and figure out what they're doing and why. I think those are actually the most interesting conversations, and I get so much more value out of it when either I have no clue what they're talking about, or it's the complete opposite of what I usually think or what I've just believed. So yeah, I agree.
When we were recording our podcast episode just a few minutes ago, I asked I don't even remember what the question was, but I asked the question, and the first thing that came out of your mouth when you responded was, well, I want to play devil's advocate for a minute. And that perked my interest right away because it like cracked me out of like, the thing is usually we
Sure.
go back and forth and you agree and everyone's, and when
Yep.
you said that, I was like, good, this is going to be fun. Let's go there. And you didn't say anything that I really didn't agree with. I mean, you framed it beautifully, but I like when people challenge me, when people come
Yeah.
up and say, well, what about this? Or did you think of this? And, if I'm completely wrong and I see that, or if I think you have a more valid point than I do after looking at it, I'll eat it. I'll say,
Yeah.
yeah, maybe
Yeah.
you're right. Let's, I'm open to that.
Yeah.
But I like the challenge. I like it, but I don't want to do it in an angry way. I think if you
Sure.
let emotion overtake that, then it becomes not a conversation about here's what I believe, here's what you believe, let's learn about each other and have an understanding. It becomes an emotionally driven, I'm right, you're wrong scenario.
Yeah.
And that's when everyone loses.
Yeah, so I see that a lot on my retreats. If, people are coming from all different backgrounds, all different cultures, all different ages, everything, and there's a lot of that where belief systems they're just like they're using them as a shield and as a protective barrier, and they're hiding behind them, and so a lot of times we have to work through that where it's like and that might be my therapist background that comes in where I can appreciate everybody's belief. I really can, even if it's completely and just like as opposite as it could possibly be. I just I've been trained and I can really just look at it and say I can appreciate that, and I really thank people for sharing their belief system with me. And so that's the kind of, I guess, devil's advocate too that I play is just maybe teaching people how to allow others to have a belief system, because we are so like the culture is so much like, no, you have to have the same as mine, or we just cannot be on the, we can't be friends, we can't even talk or whatever. And so, and that's just not the case. Like everybody can have their own, we have to have our own belief systems. I mean, think about it. We all came from a different, even two siblings in the same house are going to have a different belief system because they have just a different lens of experience. And so we have to honor that everybody has a different belief or a different feeling or a different experience, or they view it differently. And so that to me is, I have an appreciation for it. I approach every conversation with an appreciation for the person's belief system. There might be times, hey, look, I'm not going to lie and say there not might be times where I don't go, what the hell, like what just came, I don't know. But I appreciate it. I appreciate that they feel that. I mean, I have to appreciate that they feel that. They were shaped that way for a reason. Something happened to shape that belief system. So I wish there was more appreciation, I guess, is what I'm saying, for other people's beliefs, and perspectives and experiences and the lens that they're viewing from. Because I don't think anybody has a belief or well, let me be careful with this. I think most people don't have a belief system with the intention to harm somebody else. I think that's just their belief. That's just the way that they, have been groomed their life, has set them up with that belief system. So yeah, I wish there could be more conversations that are just like, well, let's just share. Remember, we talked about intention. Like, let's just share. Let's just share why we believe what we believe, and then agree to disagree if we don't. If we don't come to a position where we are on the same wavelength exactly, that's okay. I think it's okay. So I'm curious what I would like to ask a question. Is that okay?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Please.
I'm curious what your most like interest. I have like this story, but I'm curious what your most interesting guest was where you're like, oh, I don't think I'm going to be able to maybe like air it. Has that ever happened to you where you've had
It
someone you're like,
has. I don't
oh,
want to call anyone out because if I tell you this here in this setting, then they're
it's
going to know
okay.
exactly who they are. So I'll tell you that off the air.
Okay.
So that'll be something I'll tell. But I have had people on that I just couldn't air, or that it just didn't work out. I want to give everyone a chance and
Sure.
see, how it plays out. And, that happens because I've done thousands of interviews over the past
Sure.
couple of years. And so that's going to happen, and I'm okay with that. And I'll go there. And, that's
Yeah.
that's part of me protecting my audience, just
Sure.
because they show up for it. And I don't take the audience lightly, because they're giving me their most valuable asset, which is their time.
Absolutely.
They're putting me they're even if it's just 10 minutes or 15 minutes or whatever, I really respect that. I appreciate that. And I don't want to take that for granted. So I want to make sure whatever they're giving me that 10 minutes, I want to fill it with something that's going to give them the most for that time. And so
Yeah.
that's why I do that. But yeah, I've had some pre-interviews that haven't gone
Sure.
into us
Yeah.
having conversations on the show, and it happens. And that's why I do that, so that we can match up energetically and just see how the conversation is and if we hit it off. And most of the time we do. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm a pretty easygoing guy. I think we can do that. But there are a few that just are not on the same wavelength, and that's fine. And I like that. I like the fact that we're so different, and I like exploring those differences, because I think that's what makes it fun. I think if we were
Yeah.
all exactly the same, it would be boring. I mean,
Yeah.
who wants to
It would
be
be.
the same all the time with everyone? Like,
It'd be
what's the point?
redundant.
Yeah.
Yeah, it would be redundant and boring. We did have one though, and I just have to share it just because it was interesting. And we had, and that person, I don't think that they would ever see this, and if they did, that's okay because we had the conversation with them. But we had one where like you, we have video in our podcast, but we
Hmm.
don't air the video. I know
Hmm.
like this one will be aired, but we don't air the video. And so me and my original podcast partner get on the video, and then the person gets on the video and they're naked, like just
Like,
naked.
completely. And they knew that. That's
Yep. And we're
Hey,
just like,
to each their own, right?
okay. And so we still recorded. We're like, are you ready? Do you need a few minutes? I mean, nope, I'm ready. And it's like, okay. And we were like, video won't be shown. And they're like, yeah, we know. So yeah, so we went through the whole thing, and then it was like, we
Was it
just
one
stopped.
person or two people?
One.
And it,
We
like,
weren't filming a porno.
I was gonna say, like, so did you inquire about this?
Yeah, about halfway it was like, so did you, I have to stop and ask. And so we did. And then it was like, yeah, for some reason, this is really just throwing our whole thing off. And I don't think that this is going to work out. And so, yeah, but it just was like one of those things where afterwards, me and my podcast partner was like, did that just happen? Like,
I've
it
never
felt
had
like
that
very
happen.
Twilight Zone-ish, you know what I
Yeah.
mean?
I've never had that happen to me yet, but that's like, what did you ask? Like, is there a reason that you're not clothed? Like, not to
You know,
judge, but just to,
yeah,
or,
so I think she was battling some stuff, just internally, but
gotcha.
she just said she had showered and she just felt comfortable. And
Okay.
we just were honest with her and said, well, we kind of don't. And you could turn your video off, and that's fine. And it's not because I'm ashamed of naked bodies. I think
Right.
naked bodies are beautiful. It's just throwing off my whole ability to question you in a way that is fair and relevant, because I'm distracted, if I'm being honest. And so,
It's a shock.
yeah, it was just, I don't know. Hey, she felt good about it, and I'm all about that. I think
Hey,
that's fantastic. Maybe I'm too shallow of a person or too small-minded, but I just was like, gosh, I can't concentrate, because she would move too. She would walk around while she was
that's super
talking, and it was like,
interesting.
oh, where are we going with this? So anyway, but I think she was also in a space, she was going through some major life changes. So
Yeah.
there was that too. But yeah,
That's
that was my
interesting.
most interesting.
Yeah. I mean, I would be asking questions just to kind of, like we talked about, just to
Yeah.
understand and see
Yeah.
where we are, and see, like,
Yep.
there's something I can do to help you with something, or like,
Yeah.
okay. But
Yep.
yeah, that's super interesting. But yeah, can't say I've had anyone naked yet.
Hey, it's coming, man. It's coming.
Now that you put that out there, I have to believe. But Shannon, thank you so much for being here.
Oh
I've loved
yeah.
our conversation on the podcast. If you're watching this video on social media, The podcast is coming very soon. If you're listening to this on the podcast, then you can go back and listen to those episodes right now. I had so much fun just having those conversations with you, and remind people that they can find you at mindbodycomplete.com. And while they're there, they can subscribe to your podcast and also grab a copy of your book titled Surrender, which we talked about in one of the episodes. So thank you so much for being here, and let's definitely do this again soon.
Sounds great, Mario. Thank you so much.